What's my brand story? That's probably the question I get asked most often. And really, the purpose is to hone your brand story to cater to the parts that mean the most to listeners. You need to really think about how to be relatable and how to connect with your customers and clients that are interacting with our brand. Well, my friend Michael, he had this question, and we had a conversation all around how to find the best parts of his brand story. This video you're about to watch, it's an inside look at what it's like to walk someone through the brand discovery process we use with our own clients. And I hope that you learn and benefit from this real world example. Let us know what you think. Cool. So, yeah, Michael, you reached out to me and you said you needed help with your brand story. So let's get right into it. You sent me a lot of pre-work. We can, talk about that. Yeah, go ahead. You were just about to launch into like what a great outcome from a brand story perspective would be for you.
Yeah, Mark, my challenge is I see the world from my perspective and my experiences, but I know that that doesn't help people make decisions about their lives. So I want to rewrite or hone my brand story so that it comes at the listener from their perspective. Instead of highlighting elements of my business growth that I think are cool, I want to identify what would mean the most to somebody else who's making a buying decision and make sure that I give them the information they need to make that decision.
Mm.
And as far as what's okay to talk about, I'm a PR guy, right? So I better be trained at only saying stuff in the affirmative that I want to get out there and not acknowledging things that are proprietary. So that's on me.
Perfect. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. And so, you have this broad vision of your brand story. Like, how would that show up for you tactically or practically? Like, where would you see this working
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah. So as you know, I have a membership program and it's limited enrollment, and I only take new members twice a year. So there's that's a time when this would show up, both on a sales page about joining the Inner Circle, which is the name of the program. I do a webinar associated with each enrollment period. And then I have sales emails, right, that build up to both the webinar and the opening. So those would be the primary places. And then just opportunities like this, whenever I'm talking with someone and they ask me what I do, this is the main deliverable for my business. So I love to use what we talk about today, as part of those everyday conversations.
Great. Love it. So this idea of brand story is really intriguing to me personally. As you know, my background is all in the story business, and I was like brand story, brand story, brand story. And there was a lot of there was a big time where I wasn't sure what that meant. I was like, and that's why even to this day, I feel like everyone has a little bit of a different interpretation of what that means. And, it really can encompass for me, we would go through like more of a traditional branding process. And we'll share a little bit of that with you today, kind of the things that you need to answer in that process, resulting in, as we hone down, especially for a service provider, your elevator pitch and how you talk
Right.
about yourself. And kind of, this is one of those disciplines where we take so much, we have this giant collector of information in your experience,
Mhm.
and we hone it down to something succinct, and try to get there in the time we have today. At the same time, one of the things you mentioned, and I want to challenge you a little bit about, is, to me, a big part of your brand story is your experience, is your story, is your experience. And I do think that once people, um, especially as service providers, we tell people what we do, and we fit into that category, it really becomes how we do it. So kind of your perspective on this, and your approach, as well as like, what do you stand for? What are your values and beliefs? Who are you as an individual? And so I think that your story is super important. Then obviously there's also just proof points and credibility. So people want to
Mhm.
know, like, well, why do I trust Michael from a PR perspective? What the heck has he done? You
Mhm.
that, and I think you've heard me speak and stuff like that. A very small part of my story is I have some writing experience, and I worked in Hollywood. Well,
Mhm.
and I've and I get a sense maybe you have a little bit of this too. I was really resistant to talking about that because I was like, well, that's like a small part of what I do. And, I was there for, 6 or 7 years, but like I've done a lot of other things and it was quite a while ago. But that's like what people really still want to hear and care about. And
Right.
sometimes that you have to honor that component of like, hey, this is what is part of my brand and my personal brand. And before we get into it, you know, well, let's get right into it. So I've also done a lot of work this year on personal branding and thinking about that. And for the longest time, I was so worried and scared about being the front man and,
Yeah.
and being the brand of the business. And what I found is just personally is that that's what people connect with. They connect so much more with an individual rather than a company name or something like that.
Mhm.
Especially, you look, I mean, if you're a big corporate entity, you have this corporate brand and that's a whole different topic. But as a service provider and getting people to understand who we are, it's like leaning into that is really important. So as we get going, let me ask you, what do you want to be known for?
Helping PR people make more money, be more happy in their jobs. We, the way we write that is protect and grow their earning power. And then I have this. It's more of a dream than a goal. I want to create a bunch of people who can decide how much they work. They have financial independence, so they only work if they want to. And that's an aspirational goal. The first half of it, of increasing their earning power, that's really like immediate. We can deliver that within 6 months usually.
Yeah. Is there anything that those clients typically feel as an obstacle to doing that?
At which stage in their journey, like before they work with me or while they're working with me?
Uh, maybe more like a limiting belief or a
Mm-hmm.
perception of like, hey, I would love to, and I took a note and then I put your face back up, so let me go back to this. I would love to protect and grow my earning power, but
Yeah.
it makes me feel icky, or I don't
Yeah.
think it's
Yeah. Right.
possible, or like, is there something there that like most people prior to working with you feel that they would like this, but they can't do it for some reason?
A couple different answers, Mark. One is that ickiness, but it's more like maybe I don't deserve this. Money's a bad thing. I should be happy I have a job. So many people are struggling. Like, is that an okay driver for me to care about my income? Another one is, yeah, that's great, but my bosses, my organization, this place I work doesn't value PR, so it doesn't matter how good I am at it. They, I'm stuck.
Mm. Just gonna take some notes.
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, that becomes a little bit of an interesting component of that brand story. And thinking about, and we probably can wordsmith this now, but um, to me, like I would go like a little further. I think this is bigger than helping PR people make more money and helping people be happy in their jobs. I think this is bigger than protect and grow their earning power. I mean, what you're really talking about is delivering freedom to people,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to have choice, the ability to be respected for what they do,
Mm-hmm.
and to create value in their career. that impacts their lives, right? So um to me it's like that's kind of that next level. So thinking about where this brand story, and I'm trying to, let me just have a second and look at this, but it's like we kind of jumped out of order. I just started talking to you and we're just kind of like we're just kind of working on it. We can go back to the process a little bit. And we can even and I'll just be mindful of the time. We can even bang out an elevator pitch once we get some more of this down. But and how will you know that you achieved that dream and that goal? Like, is there a number of people you want to impact? Is there, uh, like, how would you know?
I don't think I've thought about that in enough detail. I hear these aspirational statements from people like, we want to create a million millionaires or something like that. Uh, I, I know that I'm achieving it already because I have plenty of testimonials from people who say, I got a 40% raise and I got a new job. I wouldn't have been able to do that without what I learned from Michael's program. But I think I could do better to think more about numbers and the people behind those numbers. So I have, let's see, two guys that I love talking about because they achieve full independence. One of them got on with a startup after he'd been in my program for a year or two, and then they went public and he cashed out at 35. Now he's a professor at his alma mater because he wants to be. And then another guy who retired at 47, and now he's a life coach because he wants to be after a career in PR agencies. So that's Devin and Ken. So I'd love to create a room full of Devin and Kens.
Who wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's Monday. My mind's blanking. What'd you say about he was just on a path to financial independence? Is that how you described it?
Sorry, Mark, not following you.
You just said something about, I thought you said something like that he had financial independence or he was independent, financially free or something like that. And that was
So
appealing to you.
just talking about two guys, Devin, Devin's stock options made him financially independent. And he works as a professor at his alma mater because he wants to. And then the second guy was Ken, and he retired at 47. Didn't do anything for 3 or 4 months. Slept until 11 every day. Loved it. And then he decided to become a life coach just because he wants to. The revenue is irrelevant to him.
Love it. Cool. Yeah. So I mean, like when I hear you talk, like I just kind of jotted down, and obviously this is rough draft and ability um to wordsmith, but I just feel like you're on this mission to help PR professionals increase their professional value, choose where and
Mm-hmm.
how they work, and find a path to financial independence. That last part may or may not be true. I don't know. I'm also not a big numbers guy. Like I'm not on this planet to impact 1,000 brands or something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
so I don't believe that you need to have that. But it
Uh-huh.
could be, I mean, if you're like, look, I want to impact 1 million PR pros or something,
Mm-hmm.
that could be a way to present it. But I also think just having this mission that you can get around, that like, hey, in these bigger things. So for me, it's a little bit bigger than, hey, I just want to help people make more money and be happy. Like, what does that really, you know, result in? What I really heard, and I feel this a lot, and that I have I've spent time in PR too, and I've
Mm-hmm.
heard you talk about a lot of this, in that like people that work in the PR profession, especially in-house, don't feel necessarily respected, don't feel like that they have a seat at the table,
Mm-hmm.
don't feel um, and obviously, you believe and I believe that to be the wrong way of thinking. And so I think that's a huge part of what you're doing and the transformation that you're helping those people achieve, is that, hey, like you're going to be valued for your PR thinking, that you're going to be valued for your mind. So working that
Mhm.
into a bit of a way that you position yourself um, could be really cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that resonates for you. By the way, I'll share. I'm just writing this in a Keynote doc, and I'll share everything that I'm writing and things like
Yeah,
that.
great.
But yeah, I don't know if that
Yeah, it
would.
does. I mean, the words that you shared, Mark, are words that I've written in other formats, particularly the path to financial independence. I I only roll that out occasionally because, and maybe this is a limiting belief of mine, I feel like that is so pie in the sky to my prospects that it almost is comes off like I'm selling a get rich quick scheme. That sort of
Yeah,
that's great, Michael, but I just want to be able to keep this job for the next 6 months or get a better job, and get a 10% raise or something.
yeah, and I think, like, that's a good point. It's like it's hard to be um, all things to all people, but I do think, like,
Mhm.
with a broader statement, like, hey, I want to help you add value. I want you to have choice in your work, and ultimately, if it's a good fit for you, I want you to have financial independence. Even if you're like, hey, I'm just trying to hold my job, I think in the back of a prospect's mind, they're like, that this could potentially end up there. And I think
Yeah,
that by
yeah,
seeding that, and one of the things we talk about in all this brand story stuff is, like, you've been doing this a long time. You're obviously very successful. It's finding a way to succinctly talk about it and then just repeating it ad nauseum. And sometimes that
yeah.
becomes a little boring, my big joke is always like, I wonder what the brand manager at Patagonia, he just must be like, or she must be like,
Yeah.
can we talk about something other than public lands and
Right.
recycling? And they're like, no,
Yeah.
no, we don't talk about that. We just
No.
we talk about the same things, and
Mhm.
hit it over and over and over again. But we can move on a little bit, and I can give you a sense of, so when I think of the like, if we were going to spend time and really, spend probably days working on this, or something like that. I'm just going to find a resource here. I'll share my screen as soon as I find it. Right. So I really think of, let me go ahead and share, of building a brand story to look something like this. Just trying to help size it, since I have a monster monitor. Sometimes it gets all weird if we don't do it.
Mhm.
So it's really answering these 7 or so questions,
Mhm.
and then working them into a succinct positioning. But why are we here? What's your why? What's your purpose? We just talked about that. We
Mhm.
talked and articulate that. What do we do and how do we do it? So a lot of times it can be nuts and bolts. It's like, hey, I run um, a closed private group for PR professionals, and how do I do it? What's your method for delivery? So that's not so exciting, but a lot of times people care about that. They want to know, is this virtual? Is it in person? What is my
Mhm.
time commitment? What makes you different? So, really thinking about, what's your uniqueness? Why should I um, work with Michael instead of another program? Now, a lot of times with service providers, it's our story, it's who we are, it's our approach, it's what we bring to it. You might be a little bit different. I don't know. Do you have a lot of competitors? I'm not familiar with a lot of your competitors. Are a lot of people out there competing with you?
No, the inner circle's the first, largest, and best professional development resource for PR pros who are focused on media relations or earned media, and you know what that means. And basically anybody who doesn't know what that means wouldn't be a good candidate. So I don't need to explain it to them.
Well, that's perfect. So that's a great positioning, right? We're
Yeah.
the big first and biggest. And whenever you're the first and the largest, there that is positioning, like to be number one in your category.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that opportunity a whole lot. And when we do, when you're a Coke, when you are, I guess I was about to say Ford, but I don't know if they're in number one. But when
Yeah, right.
when you're the the biggest and the best, and you can say that legitimately, that's a good positioning
Well,
place to
don't give
be.
me too much credit, Mark, right? All I did was slice the pie narrower, right? There's a bigger groups for all of PR people, but when I just target the earned media specialists, then I pretty much have that space to myself.
Well, give yourself credit, because doing that and slicing the pie into a
Mhm.
niche that is narrow enough that you can own it but still maintain a living, that's what most people are looking for. So
Yeah,
you've done something right.
I'll
um
take that.
yeah, who are we here for? You really, you very clearly have articulated,
Mhm.
who you serve and the type of clients you serve. Now, it's those people who are media relations professionals. You might even at some point get a little narrower, right? It's for media relations professionals that are stuck in a, not, well, maybe not stuck, but are working in an in-house PR, PR position at this level, at this size company. I mean, you could really get narrow there if you wanted. It sounds like right now that you have a pretty good focus on who you are for and who you're not. And you just made that statement prior to getting here,
Right.
and number three, that like, hey, if you don't know, what media relations and earned media means, you're probably not my customer. And
Yeah.
that's a very powerful thing to say.
Yeah, on that narrowing, Mark, this wasn't purposeful, but I feel like I've arrived at this point, and I'd be interested in your take, that I'm actually becoming, I'm more of like the low cost solution that appeals to a wider mass of people. I could charge a lot more if I said I'm here for media relations specialists at Fortune 500 companies. Like I would have a smaller universe and fewer members, but they would pay more. But just by history, accidents of history, and then my personal preference, I like being able to help a wider range of people. So I do have people at Fortune 500 firms, and then I have mission driven, cause oriented. I think I just talked to this one member who's at a 10-person nonprofit, conservation nonprofit in Florida. I like being accessible to people at that level too.
Yeah. And so you touched on something right there. Like, I don't totally believe in like accidental paths.
Okay.
I believe that there might be unconscious, I believe, but we make choices, and you just said something right there that, you prefer to work with some of these more mission driven, smaller companies. Like, why? Like, what do you like about them? Like, what do you see in them that, um, that maybe drives you to do that?
When just to clarify, it's not that I prefer them. I just want to include them. I want to be accessible by them.
Why?
So why? Because I mean, when I started out my career, I was one of those people. And I remember walking into a room, and then when people hearing I worked at a private religious university, I could just see them dismiss me professionally. Um, and at the time, I was like, okay, whatever. It's like going into a, a room full of NBA players and saying that you're a high school coach, right? That's just the reality. But I believe that I had the skills, the same skills and abilities that they did, and I just needed to prove it. And so I like giving an equal playing field for everybody who wants to get better wherever they work.
Okay. Like, do you ever share that story?
No, I don't think I've ever told anyone that before.
So I'm going to send you this recording, and I want you to rewatch
Hmm.
that story. That might be the most powerful story that you could share with your community when you're on the stage, when you're looking to enroll new people.
Yeah.
Like, that story super resonates with me. I, I don't think there's a single person that hasn't felt a little inadequate, has felt like, hey, I have a lot to offer, but I'm being seen like I'm in the minor leagues.
Right, right.
And if that becomes the mission, and even if you're in the Fortune 500, I think people feel that all the time,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. There's always somebody bigger, right?
yeah, that story, Michael, just gave me goosebumps.
Hmm.
And I think that is really the cornerstone of why you do what you do. I think that's the cornerstone of why you've chosen this platform. I think that's the underlying, hey, like I want, and when you talk about this too, and it comes out like, hey, this idea of like not feeling respected, of not feeling
Hmm.
like, hey, I have value. And I think that that story right there just illustrates for me, like if you came out like you were on stage or on a podcast or whatever,
Hmm.
and you were like, look, like I came out and I remember I told everyone I worked at this religious university and I felt like I had a lot of offer and they were looking at me like I was in the minor leagues. Have you ever felt like
Yeah.
that? Like that's what the inner circle is here to do, is to
Hmm.
give, to give you, um to validate who you are, to give you value within the PR profession, and raise your exposure. I don't know, to me
I
that
love
just,
it. Yeah,
yeah,
Mark. I think that fits right with the offering that we talked about at the top. It fits right in with that. It's that emotional layer that I told you I was looking for on the prospects part, instead of having it all be about me.
it's super relatable, relates to your
Mhm.
business, and like I said, like it just got me, like I was like, wow, like I would, like I believe that about you, and I believe that story, and that was really cool.
Can I confess something to you? Um, the guy that I remember the time that I most felt like that, and I still remember the guy's name who treated me that way. Like, we were sitting at a, like you go to a conference and there's table. I can't remember if it was a lunch or just a break, and we're at these round tables, and he's on one side of me and he asked me that, and I told him, and he's like, hmm. And then he was like, whoop, and he just talked to the other person at the table. There were three of us, and he just talked to her the whole time. And I still remember his name. And yeah, I'm guilty of following his career and like reveling in the fact that I've totally surpassed him in status in our field. I will never tell anyone that, right? But I've kept score. I'm embarrassed to say.
Why not? The way you just told that with a little bit
Yeah.
of humility, right? Like, I don't know. I can't think of anyone, by the way, anyone that's going to invest in a professional development program has a little bit of a chip on their shoulder,
Yeah, that's
or
a
a
good
big chip,
point.
like we all want to get better. We all want to be the
Mhm.
best. There's no way that I'm going to spend extra time on a private professional development course if I don't want to be better.
Mhm.
And I think you just shared something that just makes you very relatable, very human.
Mhm.
Um, I could tell like there was vulnerability right there, because it's hard to admit. It's hard to admit that like darts that were competitive, that we
Yeah.
remember what, hey, we should be bigger than that.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
but we're not. And no one is, like
Uh-huh.
I have the same thing. Like, I mean, I can remember people that have wronged me, and they probably don't even remember, they probably didn't even like consciously wrong
Of
me. They were
course.
like,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
wow, it drives me. And I think that there's something great there. And I would lean into that more. I'd lean into that story more. The way you tell it with that, hey, like, I feel bad. I don't feel good about this, but this is who
Mhm.
I think most people feel that way. And so I think that it's super relatable, and it will really take you far with how you said you wanted to connect with specifically how your customers are feeling, your clients are
Mhm.
feeling. That's how
Yeah.
they feel.
Yeah.
Like, right, that's the bottom line right there. They're like,
Mhm.
they mostly feel disrespected in some way.
Right.
Might be exactly that. Might be someone at the conference turns away from them. Might be someone within their
Mhm.
organization just like thinks that PR is just a bunch of mentions and people or something.
Right, right.
There's different ways of feeling like you're not being seen and heard, and that you're not
Mhm.
being taken seriously. But that was pretty awesome. So I'll send you this recording, and
Yeah, thank you.
I can't wait for you to like kind of like sit with that and think about that, because I think that's huge.
Mhm. Okay.
All right. So, kind of getting to our backstory, we just talked about that. So why are we here, especially for a service provider, like is so important. Like how did you end up here? And you just shared like this genesis of like, hey, like whether or not
Mhm.
that's really what ultimately drove you. I'm not looking to
Mhm.
editorialize that or give it a different narrative, but there's something there that like, hey, like I want to make sure that there's you can, the voices to be heard in the PR space. And then what we do is we typically, and by the way, each one of these could be a half day to even almost a day sometimes exercise, depending on um, the customer. For example, like, who do we serve? We get like, who are we here for? I mean, like customer profiles.
Mhm.
Um, we get into customer journeys. Let me take a step back. Probably a lot of PR stuff, you can make it as complicated or as simple as you want. You also could just go through and just answer these questions really quickly. You don't need
Mhm.
to go through all these different exercises. And sometimes I think for people that know their business really well, just some conversation around this stuff is probably enough. And then you can document it. What do we value most? So the core beliefs and universal truths. So like, what do you care about? What are the things um, that really matter to you? What's your worldview, both personally and professionally? And so you shared some of that about having accessibility
Mhm.
to different PR professionals. But like, what are some of the core beliefs you have about PR?
Well, I think what's burning in me right now in the context that you put me in is above that accessibility is what motivates me now is a core belief in individual agency, that individual people can and should decide what's best for them. And I feel like that surprisingly a lack of that afflicts knowledge workers, even well-to-do knowledge workers, that they've sort of handed their lives over to the grind without realizing it. And I like showing them how working smarter is better than working harder. How building a track record of results and expertise in your field should earn you the ability to work less if you want, instead of continuing to get more responsibility. um, and 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 also people who for whom their work is more of a passion than a way to survive and retire, that they should act more in accordance with that value, instead of the way other people think they should. Like, if they want to leave at 5, they should do it instead of worrying about what other people think.
Mhm. So we really nailed that, like at the beginning, thinking about this
Right,
idea of
right.
choice. And I
Yeah.
talked to you, like, I guess I'm with you too. Like, I believe, like that's kind of what I was saying, that we have this individual agency. This is my own personal belief that we don't,
Mhm.
we might go with the flow. We might end up someplace, but we made that choice. And so I don't know how much you do it within your program, but it definitely seems like that there's an opportunity to do some of that goal setting, to do some of that, mindset and articulating values and
Mhm.
beliefs and laying out a plan for them of where do they ultimately want to go and what kind of professional do they want to be? Because as you know, it doesn't happen overnight as well. And so
Yeah.
I don't know if you're doing any of that, but just incorporating that as part of the
Mhm.
program, I think could be really huge in that, um, that's what you believe, and that's the value you offer, and that's also what you
Mhm.
said, the transformation you want to provide to those clients. So are you providing any of that kind of mindset, like vision building, as part of the program?
So formally, we have a step that invites them to set goals on the level of success in media relations, and what that looks like. I don't talk about it consistently, that once you achieve those goals, then how would your life be different? I dabble in that, with like you, I send out a weekly newsletter, and a few times a year I'll talk about that kind of thing. I I have one thing I'm proud of is the week of July 4th. I always write one about when is your Independence Day, where you break free from working for the man, whether that's formally, meaning you quit your job and do your own thing like you and I do, or whether you just appreciate that you could walk away from the given job you have if you didn't like it. And I do tell some of those stories, like about Devin and Ken, in that Independence Day newsletter series.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm not here to tell you, kind of what to do, your business best, but it just seems like that might be this interesting way to add to the delivery and experience of your brand
Yeah.
story,
Hmm.
if that becomes this added benefit, this bigger, because you've stated that that's your goal, to help them
Hmm.
do that. So thinking about like how do you work that into the program, and it doesn't have to be this like overarching thing. It could be like in the beginning every year we kind of think about, we take
I like
stock,
that. Yeah.
and how we move forward. That was
Hmm.
awesome. And then lastly, in the or in the brand story, it's just like, what's our personality? Like,
Hmm.
are we professional? Are we funny? Are we, are we accommodating? Are we exclusive? There's all these sorts of different ways to come up with those attributes.
Hmm.
One of the things that I like to do, that I think is a really easy exercise, is I like to do like with clients, is thinking about, what would a Michael Smart inner circle themed vacation look like. So if you were gonna hire out a cruise ship and take everyone on an inner circle branded cruise,
Hmm.
what would that look like?
So I'm going to answer that straight up, as opposed to like what would make that seem appealing to people.
Hmm.
But as sort of a metaphor for my personality, it would be periods of intense focus on honing our craft. Like we would get in a room probably without windows, so we could focus without distraction, on specific improving specific skills that everybody wanted to get better at. And then there would be there would be clearly defined limits on that, and then there would be a lot of free time, and then time where we had some structured networking uh, that enabled people to get to know each other, and personally and professionally, in ways that would improve them. And then there would be a lot of I would want to float around and meet everybody's families. I For whatever reason, I find that really intriguing. Families or significant others that they brought along, and kind of get to know what drives them.
Okay, that's super cool. And so you can start to think about even going further, like why that's important. Like, what would that, when I work with clients on this, we'll spend some time, but it's like, all right, you said social networking, like describe, like take me there.
Hmm.
Like, what does that look and feel like? What are the tables like? What's happening? What's the food like? What's the,
Hmm.
I've had clients that like, oh, it's at a Four Seasons, and it's, I've had other clients, yeah,
Yeah.
we're around a campfire and
Uh-huh.
we're eating freeze dried bags, and that really
Uh-huh.
starts to set the tone of what the personality of the business is. Um, and I love this idea about family. One thing that's, and I believe that the brand story is this thing that you can articulate in a grid like this. You can just kind of articulate. That's very important. But then it's like, well, how does that show up in your business?
Hmm.
And if family is super important to you, one thing that I've seen done really cool is like when someone joins the inner circle, sending something as simple as a handwritten note,
Hmm.
and maybe something even more complex is like a little package to the family, and saying, hey, like, thank you for allowing Michael to become a member of the inner circle. We're going to have intense moments of focus and work, and I know that there's probably time that he could be devoting to you, that he's going to be devoting to me. So
Hmm.
thank you. And just another way, like, to express that family is a core value and something that's important to
Hmm.
you. Now, you can either take it, or just giving an example of a way then that we can take these brand stories and who we are, them extend out into the client experience, because that's, what do they say? My favorite definition of what is a brand, and a brand story,
Hmm.
is by this guy Marty Newmeyer, who's an expert on brand, and he says, it's the gut feeling people have about you or your products or services. And
Hmm.
how do you deliver that? How do you get there? It's much like a story. You can tell it, but you lose all of it once you put it out there. It becomes not for you to decide, but for the people that you're delivering it to decide. Jeff Bezos says, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. I think that's another
Yeah.
great way. And so, like, how do you extend that customer experience through your personality? And taking that example even like one step further, like, if you were to send a gift, do they open it up, and is it like explode into something hilarious?
Yeah.
Is it a joke gift? Is it something? So again, another way that you could
Mhm.
really share things about your brand. And it's all these like little micro interactions that then people, just the way we interact with individuals, that people then decide, oh, like this is what the inner circle is. This is the Michael Smart brand. This is what it
Mhm.
is.
I'll throw a suggestion back to you that you can share with others that's worked well with me is I love your tip on writing to the customer's family. My holiday card every year is it looks like a family holiday card. It's me and my wife and kids, and we have 4 kids, and people who've been with me for a while have seen them grow from like pre-puberty to now they're adults in college, and a lot of people say they look forward to getting that and keeping up with the smarts, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think so. And I think that's what, look, as buyers, like when we're consumers, like, yes, we need to buy things that fit into the category we're looking for. It needs to solve a problem. But at the end of the day, I still want to work with people and brands that I believe in, that I connect with.
Mhm.
And that kind of goes back to my earlier comment. Like, it's gonna be a long time to get on my own way and to say, like, hey, like people want to connect with me,
Yeah.
and I was building a lot around my business. I wasn't really I was trying, I got some, I don't call it bad advice, but I got some popular advice or counsel that, you should have a company and not like be the product. And I think a lot of times, even I just feel it happening more and more every day that people want to connect more with individuals than they do
Mhm.
with a corporation. Now sometimes, and you see this, you work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, like we want a corporation, right? Like we want a corporation to be our insurance provider or to be our automobile provider
Yeah.
or what have you. Like that good, and that feels right, and that also helps we understand keep costs down. But when it comes to working with service providers and professional services, yeah, I think that we want to work with individuals.
I 100% agree with that, and I'm guessing the challenge that you faced grows out of the fact that the downside comes with an exit, right? You can't scale yourself. So how do you build a brand on your personality or yourself as an individual and have people feel satisfied when they're not working with you directly, either people that your employees or if you ever sell the company.
Yeah, and I think that that's something people really care about, is like building this enterprise value in a business. I had another
Hmm.
business. It was a tech business. It sold. Um, it was easy to sell. I look, it had its own challenges. It was funny, if you hear me talk about in other videos and things like about that business, I didn't like it very much. It was very profitable. It ran like an awesome business, but the work wasn't that great and didn't fulfill me. And I
Hmm.
had some challenges there. And I think a lot of times there's this like trade off. But with this business, um, I've made the decision that building it for an exit. So if I were to build an agency for an exit, I'd be doing things a lot differently. I'd be amassing as many customers as possible. I'd be looking to do that. I just think that there's other ways um, to build wealth as a smaller like service provider. And so if you could have a business that does well, that cash flows well, you can use that to invest in other things that are going to actually make me my money. And that probably trying to build this for an exit isn't really what I'm trying to do at this point. Because yeah, I agree. I think it's really tough. I think it's really
Gotcha.
hard.
Yeah, I'm following that same trajectory. So that sounds good.
Yeah, for me, instead of banking on stock options or future exit, I'm banking on cash flow and investment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the way I do it. Cool.
Hmm.
Well, so and that's the way we would lay out this brand story for you. I think that you have those components, and a lot of the times it's now putting that together. And what I want to do is bring up, if I can find it. I'm literally working from a deck of like 360 slides that
Uh-huh.
I can pull from at any moment, but then it becomes a little. Uh, oh, here it is.
While you're pulling that up, I once saw Stephen Covey give a speech like that with an old school slide projector. So he would say to his assistant, he would say like slide 197, and she would like pull the different ring and put it up and then move it, and then she'd show that.
I love it. So
Yeah.
here's something I've talked about this before as well, but I call it the Thanksgiving dinner sentence. It's just a way of putting together um, an elevator pitch. The reason I call it this,
Yeah.
the backstory really quick is my mother-in-law, her name's Wheezy, and we sat together at Thanksgiving one year, and we spent a lot of Thanksgivings together. So we had Thanksgiving together. And next time I saw her and all her friends, they kept asking me how my blogging business was going.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I am not a blogger. I must have done a horrible job of explaining
Uh-huh.
what I was doing. So started working on coming up with a framework. And so something like this. And here's an example. We can fill this out for you, but one that I wrote at one point was like, how most brands have trouble differentiating from the competition. Our proprietary branding process based on Hollywood story techniques and our scientific branding frameworks helps them to get clear and focus all their marketing efforts. And those who buy from us use their brand to give them a competitive advantage and boost their marketing. Maybe, I don't know what that's supposed to say.
Yeah, I think it
Typo.
is.
Bad
But
typo.
I like the idea of them booing something.
Yeah,
Like
and booze their booze
they
their
boo
marketing.
incompetence. Yeah.
And boost their marketing, close more business. So there you go. So and I think of this as like, hey, when someone, very conversational, when someone says, what do you do? I mean, the other thing that you could look at is something a little bit more like a traditional positioning statement. And this is just an example, but it's like you'd say, hey, this new company is a super smart meal planning and grocery service. Who's it for? How do we know? And then you have your reasons to believe. And those also become, and by doing what? By providing a closed network of professionals that by giving the industry leading education and information, or all the things that you provide, would be another way to do that. So certainly happy to provide these as frameworks to you, and you can work on them. But also, if you'd like, we've got a little time, and we could even try banging one of these out for you right now.
I would love to work with you on that. I actually, something that's gnawing at me is my backstory,
Okay.
which doesn't really fit in here, but it was like element 5 or 6 on the previous grid. I kind of define myself by my backstory, and that's what I was getting at before, that I don't know what people care about from before, but could I throw some of that at you and you tell me what you think sticks, and what should I leverage and what should I leave alone?
Totally. And what I'll say on that too is just to give you a little sense, like backstory is this interesting thing. And I do have a slide somewhere, but we're short on time and I don't want to search for it, but it's like some people have a short one, some people a long one. Kind of depends where you are. If you're a heritage brand, like Wells, like this huge backstory, startups sometimes don't. And so thinking about that, and also as you think about your backstory, you sent me a lot of information, but to think about it like in episodic storytelling terms. So like, what are the kind of the key moments in putting that together? And I think a lot of people feel inauthentic, or like that they're not being honest if they kind of tighten the timeline, if they editorialize it a little bit. My general belief on this is that if you are inherently being authentic and honest, like you can compact it so you can tell it in a way that is compact and easy for others to understand. So that being said, let me know what you're thinking there, and I'd love to help you as we close it out here.
So I like when you said that episodes or even transitions, I have these focal points that were big deal to me, and I'll share them with you briefly, and like the way I would if I was taking a stab at using this as sort of a selling point, and you can give me the feedback. So people, I don't talk about it, but people ask, like, how did you get here? How did you decide to do this? And I always say it was serendipitous, because it was. I was a working PR pro, and I wanted to get better. So I went to professional development conferences once a year, and I saw people speaking there, and I thought I want to try that. So I did. I was the top rated speaker at one of those conferences. People came out of the audience and asked me to train their team. I'd never done that before, but I said yes and figured out as I went. And eventually I was training Fortune 10 companies while I still had this day job, and making more money on the side than I was at my regular job. And so I obviously follow the money and started being a professional development provider full time. By that point, I'd priced out smaller companies nonprofits and certainly individuals. So I created a membership program, kind of like a modular piece that fit into a bigger machinery that was for people who couldn't afford the big stuff. And then I realized that I didn't want to have all my revenue reliant on flying around the country and talking to groups. So I flipped the ratio from 2/3 live training to 1/3 live training and 2/3 my membership program, and that positioned me well for COVID. So when the live training went away, I doubled down on the inner circle, and it's grown, and to the point where when COVID ends, I'm not going back to the road. I'm just going to keep focusing on the inner circle.
Yeah. And so I have some thoughts there, but you said, so what's your challenge with all that? Like where are you feeling?
It seems like it's too long, and I know it's interesting to me, but I just don't know. I don't have a sense what of that is interesting or valuable to a prospect or customer.
Yeah. So absolutely. And so here's my thought on it. When I talk about episodic storytelling, literally what I'll do is I'll take a Post-it note and I'll write the story point on the Post-it note, and I'll put them on the wall, and I'll start to like look at like, is that really, did like something really happen there? Because what we tend to do is we tend to share our resume, not our story, and we tend to share like our lifeline, not like the reason we're telling that story. And so think a lot about like, there's always a reason I tell the story about how I worked, I drop in that I worked for Oliver Stone. It's clearly a name drop to get credibility and to have people believe what I'm saying. What I would counsel you on is, if you were telling the story professionally, a couple things I would not do. I would not kind of do this, oh shucks, it just sort of happened and I followed the money. I don't like when I hear people say that they followed the job or the money. It just it may be true, but it's kind of like, yeah. And I kind of believe that, but I also believe that we are driven, especially as entrepreneurs, for other reasons. Now, it's not michaelsmart.org. Like, you need to make a profit. Like that. So that's intrinsic. We know that, but you could have made a profit doing a lot of things. You could have bought a Taco Bell. You could have been a real estate agent. I mean, you didn't have to do this, and you've chosen to do this. The other thing I would say is, like, you had this really great story, and I would work in, at some point, I would say, so, hey, you were doing like, I would do a little soul searching on why you thought to stand up and put your arm up and speak. That's not something that is, that's obvious. That's not something that other people want to do. That scares the hell out of most people, to go and like, and so why did you think, and I think it kind of comes back to this, like, hey, like, I'm just as good as these other people. I have a lot to offer. And I think working that into your backstory is good. I also think, instead of saying, hey, I want to, and I did, like, when we talked about other people got priced out, and I remember back to this event when I went, and I was the small PR pro, or it wasn't small. I was working, for a religious university, and I was like marginalized, and like, I remember how that felt, and I wanted to make, I never wanted to leave anyone behind. So I started the inner circle, and what I found is that as my journey went on, and I started to evolve, and what I was really realized I was here to do, which was, and then you talk about that mission we talked about, which is like helping people to have more choice. And I realized, like, I wasn't living my own mission. I was flying everywhere, and I was kind of, frazzled, and I wasn't spending as much time with my family or myself, whatever that might be. Right. I mean, I was filling in. And so I started to shift that model, so that, like, I was spending more time, living that mission that I'm trying to have for you, dear customer. That's the way I would kind of spin that story.
That's great. It's 100% true too.
100%. I would just like not be like, I mean, we all have that, like, wow, I don't know how I end up, some things like that too in my story. I have a good answer. And like, people are always like, why'd you leave the movie business? I was like, well, I just kind of like wanted to do something else. Like, I don't have this like totally, like, I was just like, oh, I kind of see that life for me. That wasn't really, I was like, that kind of, I could see where that logically was going. I didn't want to live in LA my whole life. I had some other things I wanted to do. And I did, but so I don't have a good, and so I'm just being honest, but like, so I don't talk about it. Like, I just try to, like, I skirt around it, and I don't drop that, because it's really, as a listener, it's unfulfilling. Everyone's like, like that just doesn't pay off. So
Uh-huh.
yeah. So yeah, that's the way I would kind of string it together for you. And then, and I think that's for me in episodic storytelling, when I'm honing a story, I put those story points up on the board. And if I don't have a good reason to tell that story, I pull the Post-it note and I just tighten up the story. And then I also think about, and I'm doing this right now, like I'm prepping, we mentioned before, the call started that I'm going next week to do some speaker training, and I'm collecting. I've got a diary or a journal that I'm like, okay, here's a story. And like, what did I learn, or what do I want people to know from that story? Because we have like a pulse stories. We have a billion stories. The real challenge is which one do you tell, and how do you tell it, and when do you tell it? And really in building our brand, there should be a reason for that story. And so thinking about what that is and like why we tell it. So otherwise don't tell it, and tighten it up. And we don't need to tell everyone our whole life story. They just need a few things,
Yeah. Great tips.
Yeah. Like I love to tell the story about how, and I start a lot of keynotes this way, about how I asked my dad if he liked his job. And he kind of was like, hey, well, it wouldn't be called work if it was supposed to be fun. And that kind of put me on this path to go find work that I loved. And, but like when I originally told that story, that was a 20-minute story.
Yeah.
Now, and I was like, I was painting like the light in the room and what my dad was wearing. Now, literally, that's about the length of the story, and then I move on. And it has the same amount of impact. This isn't like a short novella. So really thinking about why you want people to know that, and the reason I tell that is it sets up my mission of why I'm on a mission to help brands après and other people enjoy that time after the workday. And that's really what gets me going. So, but it's a very specific reason for telling that story at that specific time.
Very good. Resonates with me.
Okay. Well, Michael, I hope that was helpful. I mean, we had about an hour. We covered a ton. Do you feel like do you feel like you got what you wanted? Is there
for sure? Yeah.
Sitting around being like,
Yeah, I do, Mark. And it's for your knowledge, whether I'm right or wrong, I feel like I've gone through this grid before, or by another name. But the really fine points that you called out, like I told you, that a story I've never told anybody is now going to be a core part of my elevator pitch every time I speak to a new audience about what I do. And then you just, I sort of put you on the spot with a particular need, and you found a way to give me that feedback and tie it back to the thread that's going to guide my my work going forward. So I expected nothing less. I've been following your career, and you embody. I mean, I think you might be selling your varied background short, and it makes you intriguing, right? It's like the fact that you had like a Hollywood career, and then you were a tech entrepreneur, and you're not doing either of those two things, even though it doesn't make sense, it makes you intriguing, and certainly gives you credibility that what you're doing now is fulfilling and that you're good at it.
Well, and I do, like, for me, brand strategy really is, business strategy. And so having that background, having that experience, just comes in handy. I've seen a lot of different things, and I really like it. And I get to do that. And thank you for those kind words. I really appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm just curious by nature, and I always kind of want to check out different things. And so I think,
and especially to me, I'm the opposite. Like, it's taken me 14 years to develop this business to get to this point. So the idea of starting on a whole nother path is terrifying. And I admire people who are doing it.
I think I'm done with that, by the way. It's exhausting. Like, this is it for a while, but I like it. It gives me a lot of opportunity. But yeah, if you have any questions, Michael, if there's anything you want to hone, if there's anything you want to run by me, off camera, whatever, we can chat about it, and happy to talk about. But like, I'm sincere, that story you told was amazing. I think it connects so well to your business, and you'd be really well served to share that with the world.
I'll do it. And when I put this into like my sales page and my webinar scripts, I'll send you those and get your take.
Love to see it, and love to help out. awesome to reconnect, and so glad we were able to chat. And I just hope it was helpful. That was really my goal.
It was, and thank you so much for the generous invitation that you put out. I don't know why people should be flocking to take advantage of it.
Well, I had good response. Like I was like, whoa. Like I was like, I need to
Yeah,
put more,
okay,
like,
good.
I need to put more parameters on it. Yours was
Yeah.
perfect. Yours was like the perfect the perfect request, and it's in my wheelhouse. I had some people that want to do some other things, so we'll have to work through that.
Okay, thanks again, Mark.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, stay in touch and let me know how it all works out for you. And that was Michael Smart. What'd you think? Pretty amazing story. Wouldn't you agree? Well, if you're interested in learning more about how to find your brand story, more about branding, more about storytelling, go ahead and like this video, and why don't you subscribe to our channel? Better yet, leave a comment below of what you liked best about this video and what other topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. All right, see you later. Bye. I don't know.